Good evening. It's now 6:30 and I call to order the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council. We begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda this evening is announcements. Earth Day is on Monday, April 22nd this year, and to celebrate, the City Council and staff will be hosting a community walk. We'll be leaving City Hall at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, April 22nd. We'll be back in time for the council meeting that evening at 6:30, and everyone is invited to join us. There are no other announcements this evening. There is one proclamation, which is recognizing April as National Volunteer Month. I'll read that proclamation from the dais this evening. Proclamation 2024-02 is a proclamation recognizing April as National Volunteer Month. Whereas the month of April has been designated nationally as Volunteer Appreciation Month to recognize the hard work, dedication, and passion of volunteers throughout our nation. And whereas the City of Victoria is grateful for the volunteers who dedicate their time and talents to serving the community. And whereas the City of Victoria recognizes the positive impact volunteer work has had in helping make Victoria a great community for all. And whereas Victoria believes that government alone cannot meet all of the community's needs, and we value our partnerships with businesses, faith-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, foundations, and the individuals and groups who dedicate time, resources, and talent to make a difference in our community. And whereas the City of Victoria is committed to encouraging volunteerism, and whereas the City of Victoria thanks all volunteers in our community for their dedicated service and commitment to making Victoria better. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Victoria City Council do hereby proclaim April 2024 as Volunteer Appreciation Month in the City of Victoria and encourage our residents to recognize the positive impact of volunteerism in our communities. The next item is to adopt the final agenda. Council, can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item, which is open forum. This is the opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that's not on the agenda and not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. We may ask clarifying questions, but it's not intended to be a back and forth discussion, and so you should not expect any action from the council this evening. No one has registered to speak in advance, but if there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that's not on the agenda, please step forward. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the next item, which is our consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine administrative and do not require deliberation or are housekeeping items required by law. They're approved with one vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. Ms. Hardy, does staff wish to pull any consent items for separate discussion and vote?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Any members of the council who wish to pull an item from the consent agenda?
Mayor, I'm having a little trouble connecting with my agenda, but I believe it's 5.10.
5.10. All right. And any other from the council? All right. Anyone in the audience who would like to pull an item from the consent agenda? All right. Seeing no one, clerk, let the record reflect that item 5.10 has been pulled for separate discussion and vote. And council, I will take a motion for the balance of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion for the balance of the consent agenda.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 5.10, which was removed from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote. Councilmember Evansky, please.
Thank you. I just, staff has gone back and forth and done some good research on this topic for us. I just have just some reservation about making this modification for the removal of root barriers in this subdivision. deviation from our building standards. I'm not 100% convinced that we've been able to say that this plan that's being put before us is an effective remediation. That said, and staff has done some good research. There's some more that's coming. I think that we should consider what kind of precedents this may set, the burden on staff of having to manage funds for these kind of things, and the possibility that we just have more and more of these. So if we're going to have a standard and then we're going to move off that standard, we should look to follow the procedures that we have on reviewing that, bring it through planning commission so that we have research and facts and things like that. So I would consider this if council thinks that this is just a one-off transaction, that we be accommodating, but we really need to focus deeply on this topic of changing our standards. This may not, developers, well, we want to be accommodating. We put these plans in place for a reason to protect these assets so that we have long-term protection against things like this. I feel like we possibly could be compromising on the quality of product that builders were bringing to these communities by doing this. So with that, I would ask council to think about where we want to go and what direction with this.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Evansky. Ms. Hardy, you have some intelligence for us on this item, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Evansky, members of the council. I had an opportunity to speak with our Public Works Director this afternoon, and our city planner is also here. So I'm not a technical expert in this area, but I do have some information that I think might address some of the concerns that Councilmember Evansky is raising, and I think it's just good information to share. So I'll try to stumble my way through it a little bit here. So this is something that in many communities where you have sidewalks and infrastructure kind of co-located in the same area, along with boulevard trees, that as the trees mature, they get older, the root systems cause issues potentially, right? The root systems get bigger, they spread more, and when everything is kind of co-located in the same area, that could potentially create issues. And we've seen that with some of our trails, some of our sidewalks, some of our neighborhoods. And so back to, I'll provide some historical context, and it might provide some insight on why we're making the recommendation that we're making now with this thing. And to Councilmember Evansky's point, this is certainly something, if council has an appetite to do this here, that we fully intend to bring back through the Planning Commission and to council to actually change our standard to this in the future. So this has been years in the making. Prior to 2019, our standard for these developments as it relates to boulevard trees has to do not only with the tree species, but the drain tile. The drain tile is put in place, of course, to make sure that the water, the runoff in our sand section of the road is doing the thing that it needs to do so the road stays intact. The second thing that it is the purpose that those drain tiles are serving is to drain essentially from the private residences, sump pumps to the street. And when our original, I'll call it original, pre-2019 standard was a 4-inch perforated drain tile. So perforated, meaning it has holes in it. And so as you can imagine, as trees and the things that are happening underneath the soil take root, going through the perforated drain tiles, you have created an opportunity for debris and for roots to kind of penetrate into that drain tile. At the time, the 4-inch drain tile also didn't have walls that were as thick. And part of our regular and routine maintenance is to go through and jet. So you're using power of water and spray and the pressure that creates to clean out and break down the roots that have kind of taken hold of and penetrated inside of those drain tiles. So the public works crews use what's called a connection jetter. I think that's the proper term. So it actually jets and has pressure coming out on both sides. And so it's got a circular kind of, I'll call it a saw. It's not really a saw, but it has a circular piece of equipment on it that allows it to break down and actually break through and penetrate through the roots. And then it's using the power of the pressure to clean out any debris that's in there. So you break it down, you clean it out. And so that has been our practice. And so as you can imagine, to get in there, you're kind of taking this jetter and you're trying to make it go do corners and everything. And so when you have the thin walls at those 4-inch, it was hard to have the space to be able to do that. And also the walls were not as thick, so you would be at risk for breaking down the drain tile, which of course then it would not serve any purpose, and just something that we knew we needed to find a better solution. Fast forward to 2019, the better solution that we put into place, which is the standard that's in place today, is a 6-inch drain tile, a thicker wall, but it still is perforated. And so you still have the risk as the trees mature, as the root systems get more mature, you risk having those trees get in. But with the 6-inch drain tile and the equipment that we have, the walls are thicker, so you're able to have the space to move around. It does its thing. You can get that out. But what we decided in 2019 is that with that 6-inch drain tile, spec change, larger space, thicker walls. The second piece of that was we had done some research, and there is a product, and there's some science behind it, that is a root barrier that you install. So essentially what we're asking the developers to do is put in this root barrier, which is supposed to prevent those roots from coming up and penetrating into the drain tile. And the jury at this point is out on whether that's as effective as we'd like it to be. So we just don't have enough historical data behind us, like actual real world experience, to understand if that is as effective as we'd like it to be. So with that, we've heard from the developers that it's expensive to install. So you're talking about $250 for a 4x4 panel. And for that to be effective, you would need to lay that through the entire boulevard section to create that barrier. And so it's one solution. There's probably, many different solutions, probably not a magic bullet out there that says this is the right solution. So there isn't the other piece of that. So it's expensive to put in the ground, and we're not sure if it's doing what it's supposed to do. And part of that is once it's in the ground, until the roots and the tree systems get mature, and a lot of our development has been more recent, so we just don't have that maturity, that length of time to understand. The other piece of that is it's difficult for us city staff to actually inspect. It's in the ground, it's under the soil, and so there isn't really an easy way for us to inspect if these things were installed correctly. Are they effective as we think they are? So that presents a challenge for us. So we, for several years, have been working, our teams, as you know, we're very collaborative. So our public works, our engineering team have been working with different landscape engineers, landscape architects, developers on what kind of solutions are out there. We've done a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of engagement with other communities. And with that, we've learned that there are other ways that people other communities who may have more experience with this because they have older trees, there are older neighborhoods, on what they're doing to prevent these issues. And one of the things that we've learned now is for sure, our 6-inch tile, the thicker walls, has made a big difference on just on our regular maintenance and making sure we're not breaking drain tile and we can do the things that we need to do. We don't know about the root barrier yet. We just don't have that data. And so what we're proposing here would be to take, we know from the developer that the root barrier costs $150 more per tree for them to install. So in what we've proposed here in your packet this evening is to look at taking that money, that $150, and instead of investing it into the root barrier where we just don't know, is to actually take cash money in hand and put that into an account that if and when problems arise in the future, that we could utilize that fund for the purpose of replacing sidewalk panels, drain tile that might be cracked, boulevard trees, and then in addition to use different species of trees that are known to be hardy and do well in Minnesota climates, but have shallower root systems. So those trees, so originally our trees have been a lot of the more common maple trees, ash trees, which because we have emerald ash borer, we're not wanting to do that as much. And now we're looking at a different type of maple. I can't remember which species of maple, but there's a different type of maple that has a shallower root system. Crab apple trees, white oak, and ginkgo, I think, are the ones that have been known to do real well and cause less of an issue in these types of scenarios. So it's a collaborative solution that's had many different technical experts be looking at it from a holistic point of view, and it's something that we think might help us. And there's some real world data in there, but it just gives us another path, another path forward. It's another alternate solution that we think would be easier to manage and for our team to maintain. If it's something that council is interested in doing, in making the development agreement change today on that, and this is something that you'd like us to bring forward more formally, with more data and conversation behind that with Planning Commission and then to council, we'd be happy to do that. So long-winded, but I thank our Public Works Director for providing me some of that background information to share with you.
A couple of questions for you. So basically the developer is asking us to, he's going to give us he's going to save $150 by not putting this root barrier in, but yet give us the $150 to put
Correct.
into. Okay. I'm a little uncomfortable with that for a lot of the reasons that Councilmember Evansky already expressed. We're not really saving the developer money, therefore we're not making the purchase price of this home any less expensive by not doing it. We don't know that it works or it doesn't work. For sure, we don't have that information. Currently, we're paying for those repairs out of our general fund budget. When or if they should occur, I'm uncomfortable collecting $150 for us to stash away when or if we need it. It doesn't save the developer money. It doesn't make the house any cheaper. There's no evidence that it works.
But there's no evidence that what we're doing right now works either. So
Exactly.
So that's the other
Exactly.
thing. So why are we right? Like ultimately they're paying that $150. We're just making sure we're covered if it starts cracking our sidewalks. So to me, it seems like we need to do more research on this, and as Greg said, maybe bring the Planning Commission. But I don't think I would. I don't think I'm not. I guess I don't have the same opinion of I'm not uncomfortable about doing it in this situation and then saying okay, we've done it now once, let's see, right? Like, let's get the plan, right? Like, this isn't free for all, right? And the other thing is because they're still paying the money, I don't think there's going to be all of a sudden this huge rush necessarily, right? Because they're still paying the same amount of money, right? They're either paying the money to put it in the ground, or they're giving the money to us. So I'm not really sure why there'd be a rush to do it. I mean, do you think there would be a rush to?
Understanding that this is the same amount of money being spent, why would they not want to install the barrier? I guess I'm not clear.
Is the product cost what they're giving us, and they're not paying for the installation cost?
No,
Council-
Mayor, yeah, so Mayor, members of the council, it is, the installation process is difficult. From what I understand, and maybe our city planner might be able to answer the installation process better, and then you can pass back,
right.
but yeah.
Mr. McCann, can you shed some light for us?
Yes, absolutely, Mayor and council members. To cover it, as Dana mentioned, the cost per panel is $250, and the developer here is proposing to give us $150 per tree. So I just want to make that distinct difference, where if we're talking about a 20-foot stretch of boulevard where they need to install panels on each side, that's 5 panels per side, 10 panels at $250. At $250. We're talking about essentially $2,500 per tree versus the $150 that they're talking about here.
So this is a cost-saving measure for them.
Correct. Yes, cost saving, but also we are still getting something out of the deal as well. We're still getting our boulevard trees, and obviously researching other options as well in the future, but we think this is a really good compromise for the developer and for the city to protect our infrastructure and still keep our boulevard trees.
Very good. Mr. Vos, I have a question for you. Does this give us any kind of legal exposure? Because we are not applying the same standards to every developer.
You know, Mayor and Council, I guess I did, as the staff report indicates, I did take a look at this, and there was no glaring legal issue that jumped out at me. I mean, hearing the discussion here tonight, I think about policy implications, you've drawn out some good points or questions, and so I've been sort of taking note here as I sit here. I don't think there's a legal issue. I mean, this is a you could look at this, the item in front of you tonight, as a one-off, where you've got a developer that is proposing an alternative that accomplishes the same end result. The end result, as I understand that what the city wants, is you want boulevard trees, and you want them installed in a way that doesn't damage your infrastructure. And so I think what's in front of you here tonight is just an alternative way of accomplishing that objective. Might there be the potential that other future developers will say, we want to do what this developer has done? It sounds like there's a cost saving, so I suspect that you would be setting a precedent in that sense. I think you would expect other developers to want to save the same money that this developer is going to save. Prior developers, I don't see any grounds for any complaint or claims by prior developers that installed the whatever they are, boards, sheets, barriers. I don't see a legitimate basis for concern about that.
All right. Well, one of my other interests in this is if we are agreeing to a less costly solution for the developer, can we also require the home to be less costly to the end user, to the homeowner in the end? Because ultimately that's, I'm interested in trying to figure out ways that we can help make homes more affordable. And I'm willing to do this if this will make a home more affordable. But do we have any guarantee from the developer or the home builder that that is actually going to happen?
Yes, Mayor and Council, just two thoughts about that. I mean, first of all, let me answer the question you didn't ask, which I, of course, always like to do. As to the question you didn't ask, if the city were to consider this as a policy going forward, we're going to do it this way now instead of the way we've been doing it. I mean, I guess we might want to do a little bit of digging into the question about the fee, the exaction, the required $150 per tree. So what's the legal authority for that, and how is it going to be used? But this is a request by this developer, so I don't see a legal issue down that road for this developer with this agreement. But more broadly, if we're going to set a policy, we would want to take a look at establishing a new fee that's a per tree fee for other kinds of infrastructure needs. So let me just highlight that point about setting a new policy going forward. As for requiring the cost savings to be passed through, let me put on I'm going to report here in a minute. When you ask me for my report, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Builders Association, the Housing First, some litigation involving building permit fees, where we've talked about that in the past. And where the argument has been made that building permit fees get passed right through to the home buyers, and that increases the cost of homes. And if we had lowered those, if cities across the board lowered those, the cost of housing would be lower. That assumes, of course, that cost savings get passed on to the consumer. Let me put on my Housing First hat and say, I think they would say to you that because of market forces, because of market pressures, competition will just drive down the prices. If it costs a builder less or a developer less to develop, the profit margin isn't going to get increased as a result of that. The cost of the home is going to go down. I'm now going to take off my Housing First hat and say to you, I totally get your point. I don't know of a legal mechanism, though, for us to require, as a matter of policy, that reduced development costs show up in reduced housing prices. You don't set housing prices. You don't have a finger on that scale, and so sort of requiring that be passed along as a matter of policy, I don't think there's a way to do that. Could you consider it for this one-off? If you were thinking about the item in front of you tonight as a one-off, could we try to negotiate something like that? We don't have that language in front of us, but I suppose you could ask the staff to talk to this developer about how this is going to show up in the bottom line for house prices in this development. So the big answer is no. The small answer on this development is sure, you could always ask staff to go back and talk to the developer about how this is going to get passed along.
One of the things that I am most proud about of our staff is they are always willing to find a way to yes. And we view this as a great partnership with the folks who come to do business here in the city of Victoria, and it's a very important thing to us. And so I think in that same collaborative spirit, we reach out to the developer and say, we're willing to do this, but we want to see what kind of a difference that makes in the bottom line of the house as well. Council, other questions, comments on this topic?
Well, Mayor, just for a point of not comparison, for a point of perspective on this, that in this area, most of these houses are built. So the sales have already been made. So the possibility that the savings that the developer could inure and give back to the homeowner is probably slim at this point.
You're not going to give everyone a rebate?
I don't suspect that would happen, but we're always wonderfully surprised in life. But I think on this one, that may not be something that would be a surprise that's likely. But that said, it sounds as though there's a significant cost savings, but the product isn't in the ground. You can't have a product that might protect something, not protect something if it's not there. There's a chance that it does, in fact, perform the way it was intended. We have a number of subdivisions that have been built according to this standard since 2019. And so I think that we need to be very guarded about being asked to compromise a standard of protection that we put in, and then in return, we become the insurance company for that. And it's not just boulevard trees that this is protecting against. This will protect against anything that, even on the other side of the boulevard. Everybody, I think, understands how far roots can travel, especially in Victoria soil where there's very little of it on the top and clay underneath. It's just going to run to find water wherever. And I am just reticent about having this much more risk on the city without really something in front of us that demonstrates that we have these risks contained.
Fair enough. Council. other questions, comments on this topic? Councilmember Gunderson, please.
We do get a lot of these after the fact requests, and they seem to cost savings. And to Councilmember Urbanski's standpoint, being the insurance agent, it's never the immediate sale that we're concerned that we're looking out for. We're looking out for 20 years, 25 years when these trees finally have grown. And 25 years from now, what are we setting people up for? What kind of nightmare are we going to set that neighborhood up for if we do this and it ends up not paying off in the long run? Developer doesn't care beyond the initial sale. I mean, they can say they do, but once it's 15 years down the road, the developers don't care. They made their money, they're gone. They're not in that development anymore. I mean, unless they're another Lake Town 200th edition, whatever it's going to be, they're sticking around the neighborhood. But right now, our small one-off developers want to get in and build their development and sell those homes and go move on to another development somewhere else. So do I feel comfortable 25 years from now being in insurance, holding maybe a decision we made paid off and maybe it didn't? I don't know. This is one of those things that we're supposed to be the ones looking down the road.
Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Just a couple more pieces of information that provide some additional context. So thinking of some of the neighborhoods like Savannah Valley, the first and second editions of the Lake Town, kind of near the Victoria Elementary School, as those neighborhoods have aged and the trees have become more mature and the root system's more mature, we're really starting to see some of those problems kind of come to light. Those particular neighborhoods were constructed with the 4-inch drain tiles, the thinner walls, and we are certainly having problems with our equipment. And so we are confident that it was the right decision to increase to the 6-inch and the thicker walls. The other thing that we would like to explore further, and that would certainly be part of this request as well, is to actually introduce 2 independent 6-inch drain tiles. So we feel, and if our city engineer was here, she would say it a lot more eloquently than I do, but the perforated drain tile in our sand section of our road is something that we want. It performs well, and it certainly is going to do what it needs to do to protect that infrastructure, that road infrastructure. Where we think we will have better results based on a bunch of research and information that we've gathered over the last several years is by having an independent drain tile for draining the residential sumps, so they're not perforated. So those tree roots would have less of an opportunity to penetrate into the drain tile. And so right now it's 1 6-inch drain tile that's perforated and shared, serves the purpose of the road and the sump. So by separating those, which is part of this proposal, it would be something that our Public Works and our engineering department will tell you is something that they feel will result, regardless of where you end up on the tree barrier discussion. They think having the 2 independent tiles, 1 perforated, 1 not, is going to go a long way to solve some of these problems long term, to Councilmember Gunderson's point.
Ms. Hardy, question for you on that. Should we decide to agree to this as some kind of an experiment, just to kind of watch it, what's the process in place to make sure that we understand that this was an experiment that we conducted at this point in time and this is how it turned out?
Mayor, members of the council, I am trying to imagine what our engineer and our Public Works director would say, and I think in some large aspects, it's going to be very difficult for us to really understand until these tree and root systems mature. So you're talking maybe 10 plus years before we really know.
Exactly.
But I think that we certainly do know that the 6-inch drain tiles have created a situation that's much better. And we have that because we are out there performing routine maintenance. We're breaking less tile. We're able to maneuver our equipment. We're not finding as many roots. And when we do, we're able to really break those roots down with the equipment that we have without affecting the effectiveness of the drain tile itself. So I think we certainly would have some anecdotal data from just the routine maintenance, but it's really going to be years before we would actually have real data to measure that.
Right, and all of us are probably going to be gone. Councilmember Roberts, please.
So I'd just say, after all the information that's been given here and the clarification on cost, savings, and what it would be, to me, it feels like a little bit, right, like, especially, right, with these homes already being built, like maybe this isn't, we may want to explore something like this, but maybe this isn't the right time, right? So, like, maybe we need to look into this more and say, they were willing to give us $150 per tree versus the $250 per sheet or whatever, right? Maybe we require more in the future, right? Or because where my point was at the beginning is like, just because that's the way we do it right now doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. And there's obviously communities out there that are doing things a different way. And so, I mean, even, right, if there's potential root issues, even with all this stuff, maybe we do want to start going to a shallower root tree, right? So I do think there's a bigger, or an opportunity to look at this further and say, okay, we might be open to alternatives, but we need to vet this more. And because of where we're at in the process of this, it might not be the right time to do it now. But, again, maybe if we get more money, right, like, then we're more willing to do it. And we can look at these other communities a little bit more on how they've done this.
You're headed down the same path. From a policy position, how do we as a council want to deal with this as a policy position? So if all new neighborhoods now have these 2 different 6-inch pipes, and we know that that's an effective way to do it, and we don't need to require the root barrier any longer, partner that with the, shallower trees, maybe now we have an answer. I certainly do not want to hold up this development or the progress on this development. Mr. McCann, tell me about that. If we kind of decide we want to gather up some more information and really take a deep dive on the policy of this, are we going to be setting somebody back in their process months?
Mayor and council members, I think yes, it would end up doing that because, as Councilmember Ivansky noted, a lot of the homes are built. So installing these root barriers, what this would mean for the developers, they would have to go back in, dig up the boulevard essentially to place the root barriers back in, then go and compact it. So materials, labor, and also digging up the work that they've already done essentially.
So we're looking.
But to clarify this, they have to put these root barriers in now according to the plans and specifications as.
So this was a beg forgiveness situation?
Yeah.
So they went ahead and didn't install them, and they're now coming back and asking us for
Wait a
them?
second.
Yeah, that's what I got.
That's what I just got out of that.
Mr. McCann,
Sure.
clarify.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. I guess, yes, it is a possibility. When it comes to these root barriers, we, as staff, we approve these, and the developer is supposed to be installing these as they move along with the boulevard tree installations. Now, this is just my assumption here about the work that goes into this. I'm not actually on site working with the developers when they do these tree installations, but so based on the information that Council Ivansky presented to me tonight, that most of the houses are done out there. That was the insinuation that I was working off of. I mean, I can go out there and see if the boulevards are actually complete. And if not, then they still have the opportunity to put those trees in. It's not the situation that we're talking about where they're asking for forgiveness rather than permission. I think we just need to see exactly what's going on out there.
Right, and to be clear, the house, there are bricks and sticks that are up. There are houses that are done. There are closed. Certainly, there's still needs to be grading and planting and those kind of things. But
Sure.
to the mayor's point, the house price has been set. In some cases, it's sold. The costs of this activity has already been built into the builder's pricing, and they have made their profit, so to speak, if they have some. Or this is now asking for us to change the rules of the game and go into the insurance business in lieu of adhering to a standard that we've already held all the other subdivisions to. So I think that that's important.
You have summarized that beautifully, Councilmember Evansky. Summarized that beautifully.
Thank you.
So, okay. So I'm hearing about two different positions here. I'm hearing that we want to do a deep dive on this policy and see what we want to do for the future. The situation in front of us right now is how do we manage the Brookmore situation? So if anyone has a motion, we can certainly entertain a motion.
Well, if we don't want to do it, I mean, do we have to go back to the draw, right? Like,
Yeah, Ms. Harvey,
So-
please.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Roberts, I'm looking at our city planner, but I believe that it would just refer back to your original agreement. So you would not approve the amendment, and everything would fall back to the what was originally agreed to in the development agreement, and they would have to follow the specifications that are in our standards.
I feel like that's where we're at. Like,
The other thing that I would be interested in knowing is what it would look like if we did an experiment. And I kind of side with Councilmember Gunderson, and I don't really want to be an insurance agency. And I don't know that that's our role, and it's probably not a good one for us. So, but I'm interested in the experiment. So I don't know if there are other communities that we can research that maybe have done something similar and kind of what their results have been. Yeah, Ms. Hardy.
So, Mayor, members of the council, so I'll summarize what I think I'm hearing, and then you can correct me or thumbs up, thumbs down. So what I think I'm hearing is that there is not support this evening, or not majority support this evening for approving the development agreement amendment. So if that does not go through, you just either, however the city attorney would prefer that to happen. But then I think the second piece of that is bringing back a deeper dive policy discussion that we would actually bring initially to the Planning Commission. As you know, they are your research arm doing the heavy lifting on that. Staff has already done quite a bit of research and connecting with other communities at different life stages of their growth cycles and how they've handled these situations. And so we have some of that data that we can bring forward to those discussions. And I think it would probably benefit the Planning Commission, the community and council to maybe hear from some of those technical experts directly, your city engineer and your public works, who can speak to this a lot more eloquently than I would be able to, or Brian would be able to as your city planner.
are we also able to, I mean, I guess just for staff when we're negotiating these things, right? Like to the mayor and Councilmember Ivansky's point, like we're way down the road, right, on this. Like if they want to do something like this, like we need to talk about it when we're approving it at the beginning, because if there's savings, we would like to see it pushed to the homeowner, right? So
Sure.
versus at the end when it's like you said, already being sold, or it's, you know, right there to be sold, and they're not going to change their price at this point. So
And there've been a lot of happenings in the last few months related to the realty industry and the home ownership industry that we should start to see a decline in just on outward forces on home prices. Prices should start to go down based on commissions being reduced, things like this, housing first issues that communities are reducing their fees for or having to get rid of them altogether. We should start to see that. We shouldn't be getting back, well, housing forces are still such that the market is driving it. That's going to start to not hold any water. And I think one of our questions moving forward is, what are you doing to actively now reduce the cost of housing? And first-time home buyers, great homes like we have in Victoria, what are you doing to reduce those costs? And it's frustrating, and I'm going to live above this development. And the aside isn't the trees that we're going to be planting, it's the trees that are going to come up that in 10 years that started as a helicopter like they do in my yard now. Because all the mature trees send germinated helicopters out into all over the place. And they're going to grow in that area. We plant slow growing roots or shallow growing roots. I can tell you there are going to be some roots that are growing fast and deep because they're coming from the mature trees in the more established neighborhoods. So, but those are two different things. But the biggest one right now I'm just frustrated with is we keep hearing, well, the market isn't there yet to see a reduce in home value because the materials are the same. The labor seems to be, we're getting hold of labor and materials just fine to continue to grow. But now all these things are setting up to show a decline in the house pricing, not based on the quality of the home, but on outward forces that are being imposed on it. And so I think until we see that, at the beginning of the conversation is the best place to have these conversations, and not at the tail end when the house is just about to be moved into in a week. So
I had one final question. If the developer wants to delay the work until we make a decision, is that possible? Or is there a timeline wrapped up in that development agreement that he has to get this work done? Or could he wait for our policy, could they wait for our policy decision?
Mayor and council members, they could wait for our policy decision. Our development agreement states that they have a year timeline from when the plantings are put in the ground. So that is when the timeline would officially start. So if we look into that, come up with an alternative, bring it back to you guys, and then they move forward from there, that would work.
Okay.
Okay. And
Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I would just add to that there are some other kind of statutory time clock related things with other developments on our planning commission schedule that we do have scheduled for April. So the earliest that we would have our planning commission be able to be in a position to have our planning commission to look at this from a policy lens would be in May.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Urbanski.
I was just going to point out that, you know, there is a path forward to not delay this subdivision, and that is to have the developer stick to the agreement that's in place. And to Council Member Gunderson's point, and I think that we have some agreement, we don't want to be in the insurance business on this. We have standards. There might be some questions about the veracity of the barrier, but I think if we don't like to be in the insurance business, the path forward seems to be that we'd make a motion to reject these amendments, and the builder can choose to install what we've asked them to install. We are somewhat conflating very good points about housing affordability and some of the development costs that are in it. In the instant case, those costs that train is on the tracks. It's down the rails. It's been priced into the house, and at this point, those cost savings don't inure to the homeowner. What we're being asked to do is compromise our standard, and in exchange for that standard, say we want to give the city some money that we feel is the cost differential, and then step away from installing a product. And that product only has one chance to be installed, and that is here and now. It's not something that can be taken back later and and put in. So the broader policy issue, I think, is an excellent one that, if we can later look at a different structure and then is different structure with the expectation that your costs are now lower, we anticipate that you should be able to inure that benefit to the homeowner. That's a different conversation. The conversation tonight, it's about whether or not the city of Victoria wants to be in the insurance business and $150 a tree or not.
Yeah, very good. Again, nicely and concisely said. Mr. Vos, how do we proceed with this? Do we just make a motion to reject the amendment to the development agreement?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I guess you could do one of two things. You're asked to amend 3 agreements, make identical amendments to each of the 3 agreements. You could either do nothing, which is not agreeing to make those amendments, or you could affirmatively say no. It sounds like that's where the will of the majority is here tonight. The only difference between those two is just procedurally how you would reconsider that decision if you got new information from staff, or if developer wanted to weigh in on that conversation and communicate to you some additional information. If you say no affirmatively, you'd have to bring a motion to reconsider that decision to put this item before the body again in the future. If you say nothing tonight, you just don't say yes, then of course this item could just come back in the future without having to reconsider. So you can do it either way.
Okay. I would go with the second choice. If that's all okay with everybody, we're not going to have any kind of a yes, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and maybe to the city attorney. I'm just, if there is it's a broad question, just for clarification. If there is a desire and will for the council to have the planning commission take a look at this, at a deeper dive in a policy discussion, if we're going with an affirmative no, then for that policy discussion to come back to the council, there would have to be a motion to reconsider.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, Manager Hardy. I think the council, if the council wants the planning commission to consider this, I suppose council can direct the staff to have that happen. So maybe that's a separate item, separate motion here on this item. I think if you affirmatively say no to these requested amendments, you can still have your planning commission look into changing the policy. So I don't think those are mutually exclusive. So you could, if you wanted to, Mayor, it sounds like you don't want to, but if others wanted to and somebody made a motion to say no to these requested amendments, somebody could then make a motion to still direct the planning commission to look into the policy, and the planning commission would need to do that then. So you can do both those things.
Okay.
I mean, we're on a consent agenda item, so if we're voting no to the consent agenda, are we saying affirmatively no?
Yeah, so Mayor, Council, great question. I like the process of thinking that's helpful. I guess my view is, and I'm open to suggestion about how you, the council, view it, but I think when somebody makes a motion or a request to remove something from the consent agenda and talk about it, you have moved it. You have in effect moved it off the consent agenda onto the regular agenda. Okay. So that's my view.
Then the question is then, can we direct, if we don't affirmatively say no and we come back and we ask for more information, when a developer decides, if we have not already had the conversation with the planning commission or they've not had a chance to review it and it's come back through to us, is it appropriate to prescribe this conversation that happens at the beginning of the conversation, and so that we are fully aware of where we're at? Because to the point we've made a little bit is that once the train's left the station, we're left with being the bad guy or the bad guy, sometime in for a lack of a better term, right? So I think what we'd be looking for is just to cover us, to have these conversations early on, to have, and we do for the most part as many as we can. But these little ones that come up that save somewhere, however many different thousands of dollars per home, we're having them at the end, and I'd like to see them at the beginning to say, okay, we're gonna differ. Is there anything on here that we don't know, or that you think you're gonna deviate from, that you're not asking us right now? And that's where
Yeah.
Councilmember Gunderson, I'm not sure that I agree that we are the bad guy and the bad guy. I think we can say no to this, and then this item moves off of our agenda. And then on the basis of that, in consultation with staff, the developer can make a decision, can say, all right, council has spoken on this particular topic, and they can choose to go forward and install the roof barrier according to the specifications and move off this and go forward. The policy position that we have is a separate item, and I think that we're in reasonable agreement that it should be something we look at, because we feel that there are broader implications of what that could do to the home prices and making things more affordable. And then if there is something that, if the developer feels that there is enough time in their development schedule to be able to bring that back to the city staff, to be able to bring it through planning commission to explore those things, if all that seems to fit in their time frame and there's a compelling reason for that, then we would reconsider it at another point. So I don't really see that we're the bad guy. I think we're just holding true to our policy, holding true to our position, and saying, right, we believe until we can be convinced otherwise, we just don't want to be in this insurance business.
All right.
Very good. All right. All of that said, council, I will entertain a motion.
Well, given that I've kicked this off, I'll make a motion
Very
to
good.
reject the development agreement amendments that have been put forth on for the Brookmore first, Brookmore second, and Brookmore third.
Very good. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And then do we need an official motion to direct the staff to, so I will make a motion to direct the staff to bring back some information on the policy at their earliest convenience.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Very good. All right. Thank you to the audience for your patience while we went through that procedural thing. That was a lot of stuff in the weeds. All right. Now we are moving on to our regular agenda. And the first item this evening is item 6.1, which is a public hearing for an easement vacation for 2460 Water Street. And kicking that off this evening is, we're back to our city planner, Brian McCann. Mr. McCann, please.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Tonight we have a easement vacation request from the property owner at 2460 Water Street. So a little bit about the property. It's just north of Marsh Lake Road. This development lies east of County Road 43 and is just on the other side of the shores of Marsh Lake development. This lot is one of 23 approved single-family lots within this development, which are zoned PUD with a underlying R1. And final plat for these lots was approved in February of 2014. And as you can see, there aren't any drain tile easements running through the center of this plat, so those were added after it was recorded. Here is a survey of the lot that shows the 20-foot easement that is being discussed tonight. So the applicant is requesting to vacate this drainage and utility easement to allow future improvements to their rear yard. You can see it takes up a significant portion of their rear yard, which hinders any sort of improvements. You can't have structures, pools, very limited fencing in these easements. And so as staff looked at this, we determined that the drain tile was not necessary within this easement. So city staff support vacating it. And then just as an additional note, easements should be vacated if they do not serve a public purpose. In this case, we believe that the drainage will not be impacted by removal of the drain tile and removal of this easement.
1 second.
Sure.
Is there drain tile in this easement?
That's my understanding, yes. But as you can see, they're at the tail end. So what I've been told by other members of staff is that vacating this shouldn't impact the rest of the neighborhood at all because it flows down towards Outlot B here. So
they could remove that drain tile.
correct, yes, without impacting any other property.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes. So then tonight, we do need a public hearing for this request. State statute requires 2 consecutive newspaper notices, which were published in the March 14th and 21st Chanhassen Villager. We also sent mailings out to property owners within 350 feet of the property boundaries. At the time of, well, tonight, we've only received 1 general inquiry from a resident. They didn't have any comments in support or opposition to the request. They were just curious about what the intent of vacating the easement was. So staff's recommendation this evening is to hold a public hearing on the request and then adopt the resolution vacating the drainage and utility easement. With that, staff can stand for questions, and I have a sample motion on the screen for you tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McCann. This is a public hearing, so if anyone in the audience wishes to speak to this item, please step forward and state your name for the record and go on with your comments. Anyone wishing to speak to this item? Seeing no one, I will now close the public hearing and open the floor for council discussion. Council, any comments on this item?
Just
Councilmember Gunderson.
drain tile doing now? I don't want to create a situation where all of a sudden we get rid of the drain tile, we get rid of the easement, and the yard turns into a swamp. I mean, are we going to create an outlot problem in their backyard? Is basically what I'm getting at.
Sure. Councilmember Gunderson, I've been told that that shouldn't happen, but that's from the city engineer and the public works director who evaluated this drain tile in this easement, and they said removing this would not create that scenario.
Okay. And what's in the 1% chance that it happens? Mm-hmm. What's our recourse after that?
Well, it would likely be on the property owner to remedy that in some sort of fashion, whether that's putting the drain tile back in. The cost falls completely on themselves at that point.
And then one neighbor, outlot. I'm not concerned, right? Mm-hmm. One neighbor, what happens? Anything? I mean, will it?
With the outlot?
No, outlot we're not concerned with, but the neighbor or the lot that's on the left, 12, I think. Sure. There's no potential danger to that particular property that could turn into a marsh or swamp, or backup could happen and we have problems with now that lot?
Correct, because they still have the drain tile. So lot 13 here, the one where the request is coming from, they're the end of it. So if it were to become a swamp, it would be only on their property.
Okay.
So does the drain tile drain from 13 towards 12, 11, 10, all the way down towards?
No, it goes
opposite direction. So 10, 11, 12, 13 towards outlot B.
So if that drain tile is removed from lot 13, how would lots drain 10, 11, and 12? Do they no longer?
It moves east, not west. So the water, the elevations, and the drainage, it wouldn't move uphill towards these lots. It would move downhill towards outlot.
So basically, by requesting this vacation, they are taking on the responsibility to do their own drainage in their yard should there be an issue. The public works director and the engineer do not foresee that to be happening. So I think this should be not a problem for us. Mm-hmm. Other questions, council?
I'm still not clear.
Councilmember Urbanski, please.
So the people in lots 10, 11, and 12, they have drain tile, and then that flows into the drain tile on lot 13 that's going to be vacated and potentially be pulled out. Where is that water going to drain to then?
It'll stay in their yard. It could stay in 13, right? Like, it's going to drain because they have drain tile out of 9, 10, and 11, and then this property would potentially.
I guess I made an assumption, maybe I shouldn't have. Are they removing the drain tile, or they just want the easement gone so they can build over the drain tile?
They'd have to do both. They would have to remove the drain tile and vacate the easement. I guess I should clarify the intention here is for the property owner to construct a pool in their backyard. So, I mean, if water drains into the pool, it drains into the pool.
Cool.
So.
It's a little icky, but okay.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
I'm just a little concerned. I'm not. Can help me gain an understanding. that by doing this, that we don't create a water backup in the other neighboring lots, that they need that piece of drain tile that lives in that easement then brings that water to our outlot, or I'm assuming that's the city outlot, and then can dissipate from there. So if we remove that, are we potentially creating now a situation for neighboring homeowners that their lots no longer drain, and then they have a swamp and their neighbor has a pool because there's no more drain tile there?
We are not preventing those lots from draining. They will still continue to drain.
They'll just drain into that lot.
Yep.
And if they're putting a pool, they're putting a pool. I mean, I think that the drain tile is going to do its purpose up to 13, and then it's going to spill into 13 if it becomes a problem. And if they're putting a pool there, then they basically have created a catch basin if there's a problem. So there's no problem. They're taking on
The risk.
the risk. We don't have to deal with it, and the homeowners to the west aren't at risk for water backup either. So we're good. I'm good. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on what exactly is. I figured it was a pool, but I needed you to say it so that we could understand exactly where we were going with this. So that it's fine. They're creating a catch basin for whatever water might back up in there, and then their filtration system will suck out, and the system will take care of itself. So we're good.
But is this drain tile buried or is it at surface? I'm not clear.
Buried.
So those lots will drain into a buried tile. It'll flow to the east and then it just terminates in lot 13? Or does it just terminate and then the drain tile fills up and floods the other lots? I'm not clear.
I guess I'm not clear on that either.
But the drain tile doesn't have a wall on it. It just drains. So it's not like,
Yeah.
what am I trying to say? There's no.
We're not creating a barrier or anything.
Yeah, we're not creating a barrier. The water will still continue to flow.
And from the sound of the engineers, it sounds like they don't believe it's going to pool in 13 anyways. It's going to continue to run.
It'll keep going to the outlot. So
Correct. That's what I was going to say, is that we've had staff members who are more experienced in drain tile than I am, and if they're not concerned, I'm not concerned.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adopt the resolution vacating a drainage and utility easement at 2460 Water Street.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mayor, I probably just wasn't paying attention. You closed the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
All good.
All right. All right. We closed the public hearing. We finished the conversation. All right. There are no more.
Thank you.
We are deep in procedure tonight. This is awesome. All right. There are no more items on the regular agenda. So with that, we'll move on to reports and emerging issues. Attorney Vos, what have you got for us?
Yeah, Mayor, Council, I've already blown my exciting news, which really is not all that exciting, but there just a development in a court case, pending court case that I had mentioned indirectly to you a year or so ago. The case involves our friends at Housing First, formerly known as the Builders Association, and I don't mean that tongue in cheek. They really are our friends. Of course, their members are the very developers that are developing in your community, so they are our friends. That doesn't mean we haven't always seen eye to eye. On occasion, we've had some conversations. One of them was about building permit fees. There was a concern that this community and a number of other communities around the metro area in certain years had collected building permit fees that exceeded the amount of costs that cities had incurred in relation to building permits. Of course, the response to that as a practical matter is that's true, but in some years, of course, we don't recover fully. We have costs that exceed the amount of building permit fees we recover. Suffice it to say, though, we sort of agreed to not see eye to eye on that. There were some cities that they found the fees to be more offensive than our communities, and they ended up in litigation with those communities. That litigation now is up to the Court of Appeals. And there were several claims made about this issue of building permit fees that periodically exceed expenses in a city. there were three essentially legal arguments made. Two of those now have been thrown out. There's one remaining issue now that will go back to the district court. That fundamental issue is just whether it is what I've already said, whether building permit fees must not exceed a city's expenses in each and every year. That will be the issue now essentially that gets litigated. And so just wanted to update you that that is working its way through. I haven't heard about any legislative activity on building permit fees. Of course, we've talked about some other legislative activities related to city authorities, city powers over zoning in particular. But there hasn't been activity on building permit fees to my knowledge. And so it's the court system that's dealing with that, and that is working its way through.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Bose.
Bob,
Yeah, Councilmember
I
Gunn.
just got a question about, I mean, that's the crystal ball, right? That's the crystal ball question. How do we know how many fees, what we've got to charge versus how many homes we're going to develop? So does that mean that cities should start looking at putting a cap on the number of homes so we know a definite number? So we're like, we're going to let you build 50 homes. So we know we're going to collect 50 homes worth of fees so that we don't go over or we don't go super far under. Is that kind of what the question is going to come to for cities so that they can budget accurately to be the good stewards of residents' dollars that we are elected here to do in every community?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, well, you're pointing at a disconnect between what you would anticipate Housing First and frankly cities and the market would want, which is to have more homes being built than less. And so you're pointing out a disconnect. The answer has been in discussions with Housing First, the answer has been that the legislature and the rulemaking body, the Department of Labor and Industry that has rules about building permit fees, that the rules have been set, and the rules say that building permit fees have to be based on the value of the home that's being built, on the value of the improvements to property that are being subject to a building permit. And so that's the legislative answer at this point, is that cities are supposed to collect permit fees that increase based on increased size or value of a project, of work that requires a building permit. So that's supposed to be the answer, and that's exactly, of course, what this city does. You collect more from relatively speaking, larger projects, more expensive projects, and you're not expected to cap your expenses in doing that. You're expected to incur expenses, frankly, that will be typically higher on larger, more complex projects. So we've been doing it as we understand the rules to require. I guess if there's going to be a change, it will come out of this court case or out of future legislation. But at this point, no, I don't think anybody's proposing that your city or any city put a cap on the amount of new homes that get built or home remodelings that get done.
Very good. Any other questions for Bob on that topic? All right, Ms. Hardy, anything from staff?
Nothing from staff, Madam Mayor.
All right, council, anything from council this evening?
Nothing from me, Mayor.
All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.